All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are here with Markus Reuter. You'll see him on the upper left. Gary Husband. You'll see him on the lower left. And Leonardo, Moonjun, Horatio Nardini Pavkovic, all the way from the island of New York City. Thank you guys for joining us today. This is really wonderful music, and I'm super glad we can share it. And I just realized they can't hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was just thanking you guys. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, I needed to unmute, but introduced you by name, and thank you so much for joining. This really is such wonderful music, and I'm so glad that we get to share it today. I'd love to hear some of the background of this particular album and what led you guys to make it.
Maybe I can say that because everything started with kind of me because as many people already know, I booked stickmen around the world, and we supposed to go to Japan and China and Hong Kong in Italy this year between February and March. Then our gig in Hong Kong didn't happen because of the political situation. Then we said, okay, we'll just do Japan and China, and we were all excited because not just Japan with Gary Husband, but also to go for the first time in China, where I've been so many times, but no one of musicians have ever been to that place. Especially Tony was dreaming to going to China and 2011 and to take photos. Then we were very excited that suddenly, like around 3 weeks before this tour, I've got notification from Blue Note here in USA, who represent Blue Note in China, that we are not going to China. Then, we had to change our flights, and we say, okay, we are just going to Japan. Fine, look, we cannot go to China, we'll go to Japan. And then, of course, with our very good friend Gary Husband, something very special. We've been to Japan with David Cross in 2015, with Mel Collins 2017, and now it's turn we choose the Gary Husband. Also, sonically, it's different. He's on keyboard player. Before we had a violin player and sax player, flute player. Now we had a keyboard player. Okay, we were very excited. We got our working permit visa. We arrived to Japan, to Nagoya, and what happened during the sound check in Nagoya, which was our third day in Japan. We came one day in the late afternoon, evening. Then we had a day off, and then the next day we went to a sound check. They said, "Look, I got message from a Billboard live venue in Osaka, in Tokyo. They were main promoters. Say, look, we are not doing gigs anymore." And then we were afraid that even the gig in Nagoya will not happen. But the guy said, "Look, you are lucky. We are closing tomorrow." And we said, okay, that's our luck. At least we can do one show. And we just did it. And after doing that show, which fortunately we recorded, and we are also planning to release a live album from that live show, we decided to go to Japan, to Tokyo, because promoter from Tokyo, main promoter, say, look, we will take you from Nagoya to Tokyo. We will pay you a hotel, and then if somebody wants to go early home, can go, or somebody wants to stay another 3 days, 4 days, something like that, because we had hotel paid until the end of the tour. They were very kind, even though we didn't do any show with them, but they were main promoter. They kindly gave us hotel for free. But Tony, Pat, and our sound guy, Robert Fratza, they left. Then during that morning, during that day when we already knew that this is not happening, me and Markus were talking, say, look, what we can do, like in uh, in um, in Tokyo. And I suggested, look, we have our hotel paid, and we don't have to change our flights. If we stay, we can just have fun, and maybe let's do some recording. We just say that casually, like. But the next day we said, okay, we will do it, and we bought like the hard drive disk for the recording in Nagoya of the Stickman, and and we said, okay, we are going now to Tokyo, and we will record. We will find a studio. We came to Tokyo, and we were looking for the studio, and we found one, but it really wasn't the kind of right studio. It was very weird. But we had another day, and then a couple of friends of mine in Tokyo helped me find an amazing studio, and we just went to the studio, and Markus and Gary decided to play, like, and of course there is no music that was prepared. It was completely and fully improvised, and nobody knew what kind of music will come out. Nobody, like, they just Gary just sat on piano, started playing something, and Markus followed, and and that's it. And I booked studio for 4 hours. but actually they play for less than 2 hours because 1 hour preparation and like little coffee break or a smoke break for Gary and but actually actual music was just the whole album was recorded in less than 2 hours.
It's really such a great album, and especially during these times. In fact, as I was writing posts leading up to this interview, I kept misremembering the album title, and I was thinking music for our times, not music of our times. And I think this album in particular cuts through all of the noise of the news and the media and the politics and all the horrible things that are happening around us in the world. And it allows you to just find peace and find yourself in a moment. And before the interview, we were talking a little bit about some of the politics of what's going on just around the world, because Markus is in Germany and Gary is in the UK. So I think of it as music for our times, but I'd like to hear from Gary or Markus, music of our times. What led to this type of music, and what led to the title?
Markus, you should speak, because I'm not sure which one of us coined the phrase, but I think it was you.
Yeah, it was I think it was Markus. It was Markus.
Yeah.
I mean, I coined the phrase, yes.
Actually, I believe that we actually kind of spoke about that in that kind of about these kind of things, because we are saying I think we say that this is the music of right now, the only gig that we had of Stickman, and kind of it came kind of naturally that this is actually music of our times, of all of us that we were involved on that tour in Japan. But actually, when Markus gave the name of our times, it's not just us, but it's ours, like
collectively,
all collectively, humanity.
Yeah, but I have to say that the actual recording session itself, I've found that it was the music of Gary and me, really, to start with, and I vividly remember, because we didn't have a plan, so Gary started playing and I was sampling his playing, and it took like 3 seconds and Gary looked at me and gave me like one nod, and that was all I needed to know. Like kind of he gave his approval of kind of the sound that I created from his piano playing, and that was all that was needed. And from that point on, I don't think I ever once looked over to see him while we were playing. It was just purely a magical trance where I was just concentrating on playing and creating, and there was like no visual aspect involved at all in this music, really, for me. And I think from this deep concentration, this music for everybody kind of arrived for me.
Yeah, I agree, Markus. I remember the need for, I mean, having eye contact in a lot of musical situations for a lot of different reasons can be important, very beneficial, I find. But something just occurred to me, a very amusing story, but I won't bring it in at this moment. But I remember that moment too, when we it was as if we were able to, thank you, Leonardo, just sit and discover really what we were going to do, because neither of us, I don't think, had a plan. I didn't have a plan, and I didn't know what you were going to do, and I don't know if you knew what, or had a feeling that you knew what I was going to do, and it was like an instant connection via what I would like to explain as your particular kind of genius, Markus, because you really set the stage by this. And for those who have heard the record and know what I'm saying, that did it live looping, he was taking segments of things and choosing to loop them, manipulate them, layer them. And I was getting a feed of this on my cans. So I was able to be as if I could be a Miles Davis, but I was in the situation to be Miles, and with having like Gil Evans in the next room giving me textures abound of sheer wonderment and atmosphere, and such a stirring kind of this vibe of contemplation, and really setting the stage for us both to really delineate, if you like, the moment in time that we were in the studio and the feeling on the street, in the community, in with people. And it wasn't just a feeling of being freaked out. It was definitely that aspect, but just the silence and the people who would deliberately making themselves invisible and isolating from that point. And it was very eerie, and it was very profound. And I remember, I think that all of us that were at the session that day, of course, everybody in the world, but particularly us in that situation, were able to take an opportunity to create and expand on that, and to bring into play exactly what we were feeling. And there was absolutely no effort involved between myself and Markus. I have to congratulate both Leonardo and Markus, because you were both great. How was I?
It's okay. You know.
Yeah.
Actually, Gary, I knew you from Alan Holdsworth's music, and I had only known you as just a bombastic, incredible drummer. not like, I don't mean bombastic like playing too much or something like that, but the capability to just explode musically on the drums. And I didn't know until I started following you on Instagram. I didn't know what a talented pianist you were. And then to hear this album, it just felt like these two know how much they can play, and they know exactly what they're going to play. And I love the minimalistic approach to this record, because it really is kind of quiet, important music for this time. And I think it does, I mean, I wasn't with you, but I think it does reflect what I can imagine you were experiencing in Asia just at the start of this, pandemic news cycle. So I'm just so grateful for what you brought. Can you talk a little bit about your background on the piano?
Oh, well, no big deal, really. I took piano. I was trying to reach the piano when I was very, very young. And so as soon as I could reach the keys, I was trying to do that. So I was really attracted to it. And from that point on, I just had classical piano training and theory, and this whole intense regime of classical piano study and tuition and training. And from that moment, it just became like a sort of very primary study. But I was never going to be a concert platform performer. So there was always this a little bit of an uncomfortable feeling with my teacher, because she was only really interested in her next protege, her next star, performer. And I was going, well, I'm going to improvise. Yes, I love this music, and I became very influenced by it. And you can hear that on the record. You can hear Eric Satie and Claude Debussy, and of course a lot of the Impressionists. But you can also hear reflections of the time I spent with Bartok's Microcosmos system, for instance. And and how absorbed I became in that, and what an influence it was on me. So I mean, the whole gamut of my piano development, topped off by the whole improvisational aspect, which I've been working to develop for many years now, decades. So this was really a summation of so much. Plus, it's the only record that and just to finish that, drums came later, by the way, a good 5, 6, 7 years later, and for a very good reason, but they just did. And I was very happy having both instruments in combination, because they were the whole of the music enterprise, as I felt it and needed it to be, was represented by the two instruments, and the way that they crossed and gave and give whatever they give to each other. So that coexistence, in a way, represents the entire thing for me. But I was just going to say that there was another aspect that I'd been feeling to do, and Leonardo knows this, with that, to make especially since Alan Holdsworth died. And I'm still struggling with that today. And I think there are a number of us who are, but losing somebody so deeply connected, it's really something. But a lot of people know that feeling, and we just get on with it and continue and be happy for what was. But the thing that I felt most of all when we lost him was that I wanted to make a really down record, and to the point, I just wanted to make the saddest record in the world. I mean, I did. And then once you do something like that, you get it out of your system and you move on to something else. No big deal, but it was definitely on my agenda. So in that respect, this record really represents what I'd hope in terms of its power and what it conveys and the way it came together. I think it really takes care of what I was wanting to do in that department. Plus, it really mirrors, as a child, the true passion, well away from the classical piano, of what my mother used to call, oh, he's up in the room playing the scene. And that's what she'd call it. And it was true. And I forgot about this for many years, that I would go to the room with the piano was in, and if something had happened, or somebody had had an argument, or I'd witnessed something, or seen a powerful film, or some aspect of life, I'd go and play it in terms of improvisation, and expand on it, and create on it. And it was a way of, I don't know what it was a way, I just felt drawn to do it. And so, since it was a process that I forgot about for many years, that it suddenly came to mind that is represented on the record too, because this album is nothing if not mirroring that directly. It's quite incredible.
Well, I think that's a great segue to the song White Horses for Alan. So do you want to share anything before we take a listen to that track?
Me? Am I sharing?
Sure.
Me again?
Sure. And then Markus can.
Well, just from my point of view, I mean, we were both looking, when we were quickly pulling this album together and listening to this marvelous post-production that Markus did on it. And I mean, yeah, that was incredible. But one of the things we had to do was get some kind of titles. Being improvisations, we didn't have titles in place really. So I set to work on quite a few of those, although the title is of Markus, of course. But there was one track that got me, and on another video somewhere, I explained that when Alan died, I entered a period of grieving eventually after a long time not. And it was when situated on a balcony and seeing the foam on the sea as the waves roll in, which they nicknamed the White Horses. And I just went, and I was just gone with this is what I needed also. This was a good 4 hours of just sitting there and wailing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was the time to let it out.
Right.
And they were the catalysts, the White Horses. So I just thought, and that was a title I was hoping to use for a piece with a band that I was planning. But I really suggested, and I sounded Leonardo out and Markus and said, listen, you know, I've been thinking about that title for a while as a kind of tribute, if I do one musically, to Alan. And I've found the track on the record that is in no doubt that one, you know, and that's how it came about. They were cool with it, so
wonderful.
there it is.
I love it.
Yeah.
Markus, anything to add there?
Oh, let's just listen to it.
Sounds good to me. This one's called White Horses for Alan. All right, that is truly beautiful and haunting. Thank you for that music. Markus, really beautiful touches on Gary's piano as well. I'd like to hear, I don't think you and I have ever talked about Alan Holdsworth. Are you a listener of his music? Do you feel you've been influenced particularly by him in any way?
That's a very good question, because I think somehow there's more to his influence than what is kind of. I think I've heard of him even maybe when I was 10 years old, and his name was always in the back of my mind. And then there was this book, Reaching for the Uncommon Chord or something. I don't know if it's called that, with the fingers like this on on the fretboard. And I think he was probably one of the first musicians that I started reading about rather than listening to. And his I think his genius was that he really has his own style, and there are only like maybe a handful of people that really have their own style, that kind of invented a style of music or kind of music, a sound. Just like people talk about jazz, and jazz has become a sound. Like there's just something that sounds jazz because it's also been put into a system and it can be taught. And with Alan's music, it which I only got to know much later, really. I find that he has kind of like invented his own sound world, and that was something that I've always been drawn to. And I'm still, I mean, super honored. Like both Leonardo and Gary have been very close to him, and Leonardo supports me as a musician. And like just even like being in the same circle of people is something that is, it's difficult to understand that I made it here. But I guess it really is, this interest in developing your own sound world, and that's always what I've been about. I wasn't interested in recreating anything ever. It actually was it was horrible for me, you know, when I had to perform other people's music. I felt very, very bad, and so that's also why I just don't do that anymore at all. You know, I just like to play my own music. But yeah, and in terms of playing the instrument, playing the guitar, it is absolutely impossible to grasp how he did what he did, other than what I just said, that there was like a vision for a sound. And that's I wish I was anywhere close to that. I think there, like I said, there are only really a handful of people that have this power to create.
But I remember I remember once Markus sent me email and spoke to me, say, "Oh, Leonardo, I really would like to work with Alan. I would like to help him mixing, mastering albums." I said, "Look, you know, you don't know Alan. You do not know Alan. It will never, ever happen."
Yes. Well, now I understand.
Yeah, but you know, it's not because he didn't want, or you know, it's just because Alan lived his own world. Like, you know, he was so unique that he lived in a world that our good friend Steve Vai said, like he lived in a world that only him, Alan, understood. Like, you know, it was no world unknown to other humans, which reflected also to music. There is a deep connection between a man and music. You know, Alan really wasn't from this planet. You know, and I know him so well in the last 20 years. You know, and Gary for over 40 years. You know, and you know, the man was something special. You know?
Well, I'd like to comment that this album is its own sound world. I think it's very distinct. Markus, your music, it covers a lot of territory, but to have Gary's piano, and he's such a unique piano player, I mean, I don't know what he plays like physically or, viscerally, but to hear his parts, definitely unique, which I think, the Venn diagram between the two of you, there's so much stuff that gets brought in, and it's inescapable because I believe you both have been trying to create your own sound world. So speaking of, there's somebody asked in the chat, was there anything special about this piano, Gary? Anything that that you feel that it brought out, or was it just more of your emotional and societal context for this music?
Suicidal context.
I didn't say that.
Did it?
No, society, societal, not suicidal.
Oh, bad connection here.
It's okay.
Well, I don't know. I've been a fan of Fazioli pianos, but it's difficult to explain the intrinsic attraction to an instrument's personality, if you want to call it that. I mean, they can, so-called excellent name brand instruments can be the most highly thought of instruments in terms of being the ultimate or whatever. But you can find an old German Bluthner piano or something, and it just has the soul. I mean, you can even find a Yamaha C4, like a little baby grand. And there was one of those in somebody's studio, and it just had it. It somehow had something that was so resonating about it. It not only connected with me, but it brought me out. It helped me sort of get across with it. Difficult to explain with instruments, but you can find it even with the most unlikely pianos, but more regularly than any other brand of piano or make of piano. I have found this with Fazioli instruments, and I was lucky enough to visit the company once, and I felt quite a special feeling in Italy, seeing the bare bones of these instruments and feeling the passion in which they had been brought about, and they were, and the mechanics were they were involved on a bigger plane than just a sort of, I need to fit the soundboard. It was a much broader kind of atmosphere. Everybody was involved with these instruments particularly closely, and you can really feel that with the pianos. You really can. And so this was one of them. And we had a great engineer in Tokyo who was instantly likable, so helpful, and very, very up for this album recording and the whole endeavor that we've gone in to pursue. And when I think about this whole recording aspect, apart from the piano, which was perfect for me, it also took an engineer to bring about something that was instantly giving me everything in terms of what he fed me through the cans, in terms of just the placement of it, the reverb, just the general. I mean, it was pretty flat, but it had just a wonderful place in what we were hearing in the headphones. It was all part of what really worked out on so many different levels, making this record that was just perfect. It was just meant to be. It just came about so easily. So
excellent. Markus, I'm curious, how much of this album was a pool of material that you worked with afterward, and produced a result, or was it mostly tweaking? What did you do after the recording was finished, in terms of production, mixing, and those kinds of things?
I just wanted to keep it as real as possible. So what you're hearing on the record is just slightly shortened versions of the pieces that we actually played, and there are a couple pieces that we didn't include, that I didn't include in this record. And Yeah, I mean, there was no tweaking other than that the reverb that Gary just mentioned wasn't on the recording. So it was completely dry. So I had to kind of recreate the sound that we had in our cans. And that's basically what I did. And there were just like some moments that I didn't like that I cut out, but only minor edits. And yeah, I mean, everything was recorded so beautifully that there wasn't much fixing involved sonically. So it was really easy to produce. I mean, I think it still took a week or something, but that's kind of normal for a quality record. And yeah, I'm very happy with it. And on this record, I did everything. I also did the mastering, which usually I don't do myself, but I felt I needed to really stay in control somehow, because it kind of started with this, like I said, with this instant connection. And I even want to add something to that, that I think, Gary, that I felt that there was something that you wanted to do musically. I felt that when I first talked to you, whenever that was, last year or whatever.
Yeah.
And that there was this so in a way, maybe I was a little prepared for being available to give you that space to do that somehow. Even it was just, I was just making an assumption, really, but that's kind of like how I maybe approached this recording, that I kind of wanted to give you something so that you could just let all that, whatever it is, out. And I think that's why I also wanted to not interfere with the recording much, and it's just a straight mix, and that's why I also wanted to master the album.
Yeah, that's incredible that you should point that out. I didn't realize that at the time, but it's really incredible. And I remember the invention between us, or the participation together, was when I heard the album. I did like, oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, it was exactly as I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, with your beautiful verbs and stuff, which captured perhaps even more, to a great extent, the feeling of On the Day, which was particularly special. But this analogy I make, and I'm, you know, of you presenting me with this screen to penetrate, or to invent upon. It was like this canvas that you gave me, this audio canvas. But it was a lot more than just that. It was an emotional kind of sound setting that you gave me to be able to just play. So I mean, I was just like in heaven, you know. Fantastic, really.
That's great.
I mean, to get to work with somebody, and I feel particularly drawn to point this out, because I've read a couple of things, the occasional review, occasional comments like, oh well, you know, there's not much sort of playing, and Markus doesn't seem to play too much guitar. But it's important people realize that this is a very particular kind of recording, and a very particular kind of interaction, whereby the immensely rewarding experience of being a supportive textural element for somebody to do something in a particular way in you know, between two individuals, is also a very rewarding, very creative endeavor, and is represented here in terms of a great achievement by Markus, because you hear these loops of things and echoes of what I've played on piano, but it's when you choose to loop them, or to bring about an echo of them, when you choose to do that, you know. And this is what's so special, because There's no blueprint, you know. It's just him being Markus. So actually, they're listening to Markus being an incredible artist right there, even though only on occasional tracks, audibly you can experience something of a guitar. And I wanted to pay back that compliment by reacting in a poignant way and exercise this distillation in the spontaneous moment, excuse me, of just trying to be reactive in as poignant way that I could. So.
Yeah, people who haven't seen Markus perform live, it's maybe 2/3 laptop and 2/3 touch guitar. Markus always brings more than 100%, but he is using sound. He's sculpting sound and painting with it. So as it happens, but on his own time scale. So if you want to see some of that, I filmed a performance of Markus and Trey Gunn at the CProg convention where I met Leonardo in person, not for the first time, but he and I hung out quite a bit, and then we got some good pizza after the show. But I have that whole performance on the Make Weird Music YouTube channel, so please check it out, because you get to see Markus pretty real, doing what he does with a laptop and his instrument, while Trey is also doing the same thing. It's a stunning performance.
You know, I think the laptop as a musical instrument is still pretty new. I mean, I remember I first used the laptop on stage in 2005, so it's 15 years, and it really has become like instant music production on stage, and it is something that is kind of invisible to people. But even beyond that, I think anything, like when you become very, 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 very good at doing something, it becomes almost invisible. And it's a little, I talk with Anthony about practice occasionally, and about, you know, becoming a better player or something like that. And really, like the better you become as a player, maybe the finer your movements are. And at some point, people don't see your fingers move anymore. And that happens to me quite often. Like Tony Levin with Stickman, he goes like, bah, 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 and I do this, you know, I barely move my fingers to get a note. And then people after the show, they go, I have no idea how you're doing what you're doing. And like your movements, they don't relate to the sound that I'm hearing. And it's kind of like the same with this recording with Gary, that I think there's a lot of me in there. Sure. But yeah, to the normal listener, like people hear a piano and they don't really know the difference of like the delayed signal, and it's hard to tell, and it's deliberately so.
Well, and they shouldn't have to. You know, the music is not the medium, right? It's the art, and the music is a destination. It's not the journey. You know, like the listener shouldn't be thinking, oh, I wonder which string Markus is hitting with which finger, and you know what knob he's turning in Ableton to make that sound. We should be present in the music, you know, because that's the destination, you know.
But you know how important it is for people nowadays to always present themselves and as kind of like and that gets in the way of creating music sometimes. And that's why I mentioned that earlier, that between Gary and me, there wasn't any, we didn't need to have the eye contact, because it just wasn't necessary for the music to actually come to life. And so I also didn't have to consider, I mean, yeah, Leonardo took some photos even while we were playing. And so I still wasn't concerned, am I looking good enough, and you know, like which angle of my face should I present, and stuff like that, because it really does get in the way. And it's something that people often forget, you know, that that maybe the artist who is still on stage, who's kind of concentrated, is kind of like doing more for the act of music than the person who's kind of trying to overtly kind of display passion, for example.
Well, it's like
And,
Gary said, he was in heaven and he didn't have to think. And I think there's no better summary of this music, you know, and the process. It's, you both created an environment where the music happened. You found it. And I talked to Michael Manring about this last week, and I've talked to Trey Gunn about this. Trey has this great analogy where he says musicians, people think they're like scientists who are coming up with, you know, new theories and, you know, new hypotheses, but really they're architects or archaeologists. Sorry, they're archaeologists, and they discover music. You know, they're digging and digging, and then they hit something, and there it is. Then you need to uncover it, and your all of your skills and your ability to improvise, and those things are your brushes, you know, and that's what brings the music out. And that, to me, is what I hear happening on this record. We have just a few minutes left. I want to keep these to an hour. But a few people have asked, is there going to be another Markus and Gary collaboration released?
Of course.
All right. That's the right answer. And as far as I can tell, we've sold at least a couple of copies of this record on this stream. Yeah. So I didn't.
Oh, great.
I didn't make it clear, but the URL at the bottom of the screen is the URL to purchase the album. Bandcamp lets you listen to the whole album for free, I think up to 3 times, and then it says, hey, you seem to really like this album, you should probably buy it. And they don't let you play it anymore, which is, I think it's great. But please, you know, look at the URL, you know, just go to the website, listen to the album if you're on the fence. Otherwise, you know, please buy it, because the music industry that we care about is the music for musicians that are alive today, not from, you know, 100 years ago or 50 years ago. We need to support musicians who are making music today. So please take some of the money you would have spent on a concert this summer and throw it towards real music, not to a streaming service, and check out this album on Bandcamp. Let's close with the track. It's called A Veiled Path. And I'll allow, or ask, not allow, I'll ask Gary and Markus to provide some closing commentary on that track, and then we'll end the stream when that track closes. So Markus or Gary, go ahead and feel free to say anything, and then we'll listen to the track, and then I'll end the stream.
Okay, who's first?
Oh, Gary, you.
Well, you know, I'd just like to take a moment to really highlight Leonardo with this wonderful company, Moon June, because not for the first time I've been put in a situation which is always challenging and always about invention in a new way and bringing about a new experience. And the kind of people like this that exist really in our industry are very few and far between. So I would just ask people to know that when they see the name Moon June on a recording or a post from Moon June, it is the dear fellow Leonardo, our lovely friend, who brings these opportunities about. I mean, I wished him a happy birthday the other day, and one phrase came to mind just to say that in all of these recordings and audio experiments that a lot of us have been proud to have been associated with and performed on, that music speaks as loud for him, about him, than as it does for us. And I think that's very true. So what you were saying there, great words about supporting. These are very testing times for all of us, and let's acknowledge this rare character that is Leonardo, and applaud his efforts and support him.
Yes, he is a hero.
Thank you, Gary.
A real hero.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Leo is
my
the
friend.
best, and I hope that you'll book us so that
Yeah,
Gary and
but,
I can play this music live.
Yeah, that
I think
too.
that would be the next level.
I have to tell you the same thing I am telling other musicians. You have to wait another year. You know?
Well, I will happily host a show in Phoenix. It's not too far from Los Angeles. So
Yeah, you know, Phoenix is always a good place to be, for various reasons.
absolutely.
And we will try something. We have to see how these things is going on, and we have a lot of tours that we are postponing, especially of Stickman, and I'm working also with Gary for some projects, and definitely we'll find out some space and time for this project because it's wonderful. Actually, we should go back to Japan and do some gigs like as a duo, and but we have to wait. It's still a little bit premature when the world will become so-called normal, unfortunately, but we will see.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. Gary, it's really great to meet you, and it's been wonderful spending an hour with you guys, especially to talk about this.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, A Veiled Path, and the album is called Music of Our Times. It's available at the link at the bottom of the screen. And thank you, everyone who joined the stream today. Almost 100 people, so that's wonderful. Thank you for all your support.